Hello, dear friends. Welcome to another exciting English learning adventure. And today we're going to solve a mystery that you probably never thought about. Let me ask you something. In just a few days, on December 31st, what will you do at midnight? Maybe you'll watch fireworks exploding in the sky like flowers of light. Maybe you'll drink champagne with the bubbles tickling your nose. Maybe you'll kiss someone special at exactly midnight. Or maybe you'll make promises to yourself, saying things like, "This year, I'll exercise every day," or "This year, I'll finally become fluent in English." But here's a question that will completely blow your mind. Why January 1st? Think about it carefully. What's so special about January 1st? Does the sun do something different that day? Does the moon suddenly change its face? Do the seasons magically shift overnight? Does nature itself stand up and say today is special? Today, everything begins again? No. Nothing happens in nature on January 1st that doesn't happen on any other day. The truth is this. January 1st is not natural at all. Humans just decided it. Someone, somewhere in history, made a choice. They said, "You know what? Let's make this day the beginning of the year." And somehow, incredibly, the whole world eventually agreed. But it didn't happen easily. Oh no, my friends. The story of how January 1st became New Year is full of powerful emperors making bold decisions, ancient people celebrating at completely different times, a pope trying desperately to fix a broken calendar, countries fighting and refusing to agree with each other for hundreds of years, and finally, after all that chaos, the whole world coming together to celebrate on the same day. Today, I'm going to tell you this amazing story. And I promise you, by the end of this lesson, you'll never look at New Year's Eve the same way again. You'll understand the wild journey humanity took to decide when to celebrate. This lesson is perfect for English learners at level 2. I'll tell the story clearly and simply, like I'm sitting with you as a friend over tea, sharing something fascinating I just learned. Don't worry about difficult words. Just let the story flow over you and enjoy this journey through time. You can always listen again later. So why should you learn about New Year? Well, because you celebrate it every single year, but you never knew the crazy story behind it. It shows how humans measure time in the strangest ways. It's a fun story with drama and arguments and surprises. And you can totally impress your friends at New Year parties when you tell them these amazing facts. Are you ready to discover why we celebrate New Year on January 1st? Then let's climb into our time machine and travel back thousands of years into the past. Part 1. Ancient people had different ideas. Let's go back thousands of years, long before clocks existed, before calendars hung on walls, before anyone carried smartphones in their pockets. Ancient people looked at nature to understand time. They watched the sun rise in the morning and set in the evening. They saw the moon grow from a thin crescent to a huge round circle and then shrink again. They noticed seasons changing, how summer heat would slowly cool into autumn chill, then winter cold, then spring warmth, then back to summer again in an endless cycle. And they asked themselves a simple question. When should the new year begin? When does time start over? When should we celebrate a fresh beginning? Different civilizations looked at the same world and came up with completely different answers. The Babylonians lived 4,000 years ago in what we now call Iraq. They watched nature carefully and decided that New Year should begin in March. Why March? Because that's when spring arrives. Think about it. After the dark, cold, miserable winter when everything seems dead, suddenly in March the world explodes with life. Flowers bloom in every color imaginable. Trees that looked like dead sticks suddenly grow bright green leaves. Baby animals are born everywhere, lambs and chicks and rabbits. The world smells fresh. The air feels warm. Everything feels new again. So every March, the Babylonians threw a massive festival. For 11 whole days, they partied. Can you imagine 11 days of celebration? They would crown their king again in a grand ceremony to show he was still in charge and the gods still supported him. They thanked their gods for bringing spring back to the world. and they planted new crops for the coming year, hoping for a good harvest. This makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Spring really does feel like a new beginning. But the ancient Egyptians had a different idea. They said, no, 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 you've got it all wrong. New Year should be in July. Now, this sounds strange at first. July is the middle of summer. What's special about July? Well, in July, something magical happened in Egypt. The Nile River would flood. Now, flooding sounds like a disaster, doesn't it? But in Egypt, this flooding was absolutely crucial to survival. You see, Egypt is mostly desert. Without the Nile River, nothing grows. Nothing lives. The country would be completely dead. But every July, the river would flood its banks, spreading water and rich, fertile soil across the land. This flooding made farming possible. It brought life to Egypt. So when the river flooded, Egyptians celebrated joyfully, shouting, "The new year has begun. Life continues. We will eat this year. The Nile has blessed us again." And then there were the ancient Chinese. They looked up at the sky and decided to create a calendar based not on the sun like everyone else, but on the moon. The moon goes through its cycles faster than the sun goes through seasons, so the Chinese New Year moves around. It happens somewhere between late January and February, but it's different every single year. You can't predict it easily. Even today, Chinese New Year, which people also call Spring Festival, is one of the biggest celebrations in the entire world. It doesn't last just one night like Western New Year. Oh no, it lasts for 15 whole days. Families travel hundreds of miles to reunite. They give red envelopes stuffed with money to children. They set off firecrackers that bang and pop so loudly you can't hear yourself think. They eat special dumplings and noodles. It's absolutely spectacular. And the ancient Persians had yet another idea. They said New Year should be on March 20th, which is the spring equinox. That's the one day of the year when daytime and nighttime are exactly equal length, 12 hours each. They called this celebration Nowruz, and incredibly, it's still celebrated today in Iran and many other countries. It's over 3,000 years old. So you see, ancient people all over the world celebrated New Year at different times. They based it on nature, on things they could see and feel. Seasons changing, rivers flooding, the moon cycling, day and night becoming equal. Nobody, and I mean nobody, celebrated on January 1st. That date meant absolutely nothing to ancient people. It was just another random winter day. So what changed? How did January 1st become special? Well, for that, we need to meet the Romans. Part 2. The Romans and their terrible calendar. Now we travel to ancient Rome about 2,000 years ago. Rome was becoming a great empire, conquering lands all around the Mediterranean Sea. Roman soldiers marched everywhere. Roman laws spread across the known world. Roman engineers built roads and bridges that still stand today. But the Romans had a big, embarrassing problem. Their calendar was absolutely terrible. It was a complete mess. You see, the early Roman calendar only had 10 months. Yes, you heard me right. Just 10. They would count through 10 months, and then there would be this weird gap of winter time that didn't belong to any month at all. People just waited for spring to come back, and then they'd start counting months again. This is why months have such weird names today, by the way. September comes from the Latin word septem, which means 7. But September is the 9th month now. October comes from octo, meaning 8, but it's the 10th month. November comes from novum, meaning 9, but it's the 11th month. And December comes from decem, meaning 10, but it's the 12th month. The names are all wrong because the calendar got changed after they were named. But it gets worse. The Roman calendar didn't match the seasons properly at all. Farmers had no idea when to plant their crops. Should we plant now or wait? Nobody knew. Generals planning military campaigns couldn't figure out when good weather would come. Should we march now or will we get stuck in snow? Who knows? And to make everything even more chaotic, Roman politicians would cheat with the calendar. If a politician's term of office was ending and he wanted to stay in power longer, he would just add some extra days or even a whole extra month to the year. Or if he wanted to rush through something, he'd remove days to make time go faster. The calendar had become a tool for corruption and power games. It was ridiculous. Something had to change. Part 3. Julius Caesar fixes everything. In the year 46 BC, one of the most powerful and brilliant men in Rome decided enough was enough. His name was Julius Caesar. Now, Caesar was not just a politician. He was an incredible military general who had conquered Gaul, which we now call France. He was a brilliant strategist. He was also, interestingly, a very educated man who loved learning and science. He had just returned from Egypt where he had met and fallen in love with Queen Cleopatra. Yes, that famous Cleopatra. While he was in Egypt, Caesar had noticed something. The Egyptian calendar actually worked. It was based on the sun and the stars, and it was remarkably accurate. Caesar thought to himself, why can't Rome have a calendar this good? So Caesar returned to Rome and called a meeting. He summoned the best astronomers in the world, the smartest mathematicians he could find, and told them your job is to create a calendar that makes sense. A calendar based on science and nature, not on political games. I don't care how long it takes, just do it right. These scientists worked for months. They observed the stars moving across the night sky. They calculated how long it actually takes the Earth to go around the sun. They did complex mathematics with numbers so large it would make your head spin. They argued and debated and tested their ideas. Finally, they came to Caesar with their solution, looking exhausted but proud. We have done it, great Caesar, the chief astronomer announced. We have created the perfect calendar. Tell me everything, Caesar demanded, leaning forward eagerly. The astronomer spread out scrolls covered in numbers and diagrams. Well, he began, speaking carefully, a normal year will have 365 days. This matches almost exactly how long it takes Earth to circle the sun. Almost. Caesar interrupted. What do you mean almost? The astronomer nodded. Yes, almost. You see, the Earth actually takes 365 days and about 6 hours. So if we only count 365 days every year, we'll slowly fall behind. After 4 years, we'll be a full day behind where we should be. So what do we do? Caesar asked. Simple, said the astronomer with a smile. Every 4 years, we add 1 extra day. We'll call it a leap year. This keeps everything accurate. Caesar thought about this and nodded slowly. That's clever. Very clever. And how many months? 12 months, my lord, the astronomer replied. Not 10 like our current mess. We've added 2 more months to make a complete cycle. We've named them July, in your honor, and August, for the month after. Caesar looked pleased. And when will the new year begin? When does this calendar start? The astronomer took a breath. We believe January 1st is the perfect choice, great Caesar. Why January 1st? What's special about it? The astronomer smiled. January is named after Janus, the Roman god with 2 faces. One face looks backward, at the past. One face looks forward into the future. What better symbol could there be for New Year? A time to remember everything that happened in the old year, and to dream about everything that might happen in the new. 1. Caesar stood up from his chair, excited now. Also, he added, January 1st is already an important day in Rome. It's when our newly elected officials begin their terms of office. People already pay attention to this date. The astronomer nodded enthusiastically. Exactly, Caesar. It's perfect. Caesar walked to the window and looked out over Rome. Then he turned back to the astronomers with a determined expression. This is excellent work. From this day forward, by my authority as ruler of Rome, this shall be our calendar. January 1st is New Year. Spread the word across the empire. And because Caesar was so powerful, because Roman soldiers and officials controlled such huge territories, the Julian calendar spread everywhere. From Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria, everyone began using Caesar's new calendar. Finally, after years of chaos, the calendar made sense. Farmers knew when to plant. Generals knew when to march. People could plan their lives. But here's the sad part. Just 1 year after creating this brilliant calendar, Julius Caesar was murdered. A group of senators, including his friend Brutus, stabbed him to death in the Roman Senate. Caesar died, but his calendar lived on. For over 1,000 years, people used the Julian calendar. It seemed perfect, but slowly, very slowly, people began to notice a problem. Part 4. The Middle Ages and calendar chaos returns. Fast forward several hundred years. The Roman Empire had fallen. Europe was now divided into hundreds of small kingdoms, each doing whatever they wanted. And guess what happened to the calendar? People started celebrating New Year on different days again. It was chaos all over again. Different towns celebrated on different dates. Different countries celebrated on different dates. If you traveled just a few miles down the road, you might arrive in a place celebrating a completely different year. Some places celebrated New Year on March 25th, which was a Christian holiday called Annunciation Day. Other places celebrated on December 25th, which was Christmas. Some places celebrated on Easter, which was really confusing because Easter changes dates every single year. It could be in March or April, depending on the moon. So their New Year moved around constantly. Other places celebrated on March 1st when spring began. Can you imagine how confusing this was? A merchant traveling between towns would arrive somewhere and ask what year is it? And people would tell him 1 year. Then he'd travel to the next town and ask the same question, and they'd tell him a different year. He'd scratch his head wondering, am I going crazy? Did I travel through time somehow? Why did this happen? Well, the Catholic Church, which was extremely powerful in Europe during this time, didn't like January 1st anymore. They said January is named after Janus, who was a pagan Roman god. We're Christians now. We shouldn't celebrate a pagan god's day. We should celebrate Christian holidays instead. So different Christian communities chose different Christian holidays as their new year. And because there was no central power like the Roman Empire to make everyone agree, the chaos continued for over 1,000 years. But there was another problem developing, even more serious than the confusion about dates. Part 5. The calendar starts breaking again. Remember how Caesar's astronomers were so proud of their calendar? Remember how they said it was perfect? Well, it wasn't quite perfect. You see, they said the year was 365 days and 6 hours. So every 4 years they added an extra day. That makes sense, right? 6 hours times 4 years equals 24 hours, which is 1 day. But actually, the real time it takes Earth to go around the sun is 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 46 seconds. Not 6 hours exactly. It's off by 11 minutes and 14 seconds. Now, 11 minutes doesn't sound like much. Who cares about 11 minutes per year? But those 11 minutes add up. Year after year, century after century, those minutes accumulated. By the year 1582, the calendar was 10 whole days behind where it should be. This was a serious problem. Spring wasn't arriving when the calendar said it should. Religious holidays were happening at the wrong times. Farmers were planting at wrong times. The Pope, whose name was Gregory XIII, was very concerned about this. He called a meeting of the smartest astronomers and mathematicians he could find. Gentlemen, he told them seriously, our calendar is broken. Spring is coming later and later. Easter is drifting away from where it should be. We need to fix this immediately. The scientists worked hard and came back with a solution. Holy Father, they said, we have 2 things we must do. First, we need to delete 10 days from this year to get back to where we should be. Second, we need to change the leap year rule to be more accurate. Delete 10 days? The Pope said, surprised. Just remove them? Yes, Your Holiness. We'll skip from October 4th directly to October 15th. Those 10 days will simply not exist. And the leap year rule? We can't add a leap day every single 4 years, the scientist explained. That's too many leap days. Instead, we should skip the leap day in years that end in 00. unless they're divisible by 400. So the year 1600 will have a leap day, but 1700, 1800, and 1900 will not. This was complicated, but it was more accurate. The Pope nodded solemnly. Then this is what we shall do. By my authority, I declare this new calendar shall be used throughout all Christian lands. And to end confusion once and for all, New Year shall be celebrated on January 1st, just as Julius Caesar intended. No more celebrating on different days. Everyone will celebrate together. So in October 1582, something bizarre happened. People went to sleep on Thursday, October 4th. When they woke up the next morning, it was Friday, October 15th. 10 days had vanished. Overnight. Can you imagine how confused people were? They said, wait, what happened to October 5th? What happened to October 6th through 14th? Where did those days go? The church officials tried to explain. Those days don't exist anymore, they said. The Pope has removed them to fix the calendar. But I had a wedding planned for October 10th. Someone complained. Sorry, October 10th doesn't exist this year. You'll have to reschedule. I was supposed to pay my rent on October 12th. October 12th doesn't exist either. Lucky you, I guess. It must have been completely surreal. But here's where things get really interesting. Not everyone accepted this new calendar. Part 6. The Great Calendar War. When Pope Gregory announced his new calendar, called the Gregorian calendar, different countries reacted very differently. Catholic countries like Spain, Portugal, Italy, and France said the Pope has spoken. We must obey. And they switched to the new calendar immediately in 1582. But Protestant countries, which had broken away from the Catholic Church, were suspicious. England, parts of Germany, the Netherlands, and others said, wait a minute. We don't trust the Pope. He's Catholic. We're Protestant. What if this is some kind of Catholic trick? What if he's trying to control us? We refuse. So they kept using the old Julian calendar, even though they knew it was less accurate. And Orthodox Christian countries like Russia and Greece said, we have our own Orthodox calendar. Thank you very much. We don't need the Pope to tell us what to do. And they refused even longer. So Europe split into different time zones. Not time zones based on geography, but based on religion and politics. If you traveled from Catholic France to Protestant England, you would literally travel to a different date. The two countries, separated by just a narrow channel of water, were living in different times. This was both hilarious and deeply confusing. Slowly, very slowly, over hundreds of years, countries eventually gave in and accepted the Gregorian calendar. Because it was just too confusing not to. Spain, Portugal, and Italy switched immediately in 1582. France followed quickly. But parts of Germany switched gradually between 1583 and 1700. England finally gave in much later in 1752. That's 170 years after the Pope created the calendar. Russia didn't switch until 1918, after their communist revolution. And Greece was the absolute last European country to switch in 1923. So for hundreds of years, if you traveled around Europe, you could literally time travel. You could celebrate New Year in one country, then ride your horse to the next country and celebrate New Year all over again because they were on a different calendar. Finally, by the 1900s, almost the whole world was using the Gregorian calendar. Today, it's the international standard for business, travel, and government, even though many countries also celebrate their own traditional New Years based on their own calendars. Part 7. How we celebrate today. So now we're all celebrating January 1st, but how did all our modern traditions start? Let's talk about fireworks first. Fireworks were invented in China over 1,000 years ago. The Chinese discovered that if you mixed certain chemicals together and lit them on fire, they would explode with beautiful colors and loud bangs. Originally, people used fireworks to scare away evil spirits during Chinese New Year. They believed the loud noises and bright lights would frighten away any demons or bad luck. But when people from other countries saw these fireworks, they thought they were absolutely beautiful and exciting. So the tradition spread around the world. Now, almost every New Year celebration includes fireworks lighting up the sky and spectacular displays of color and sound. What about champagne? Well, in the 1800s, rich European people started the tradition of drinking champagne at midnight. Why champagne specifically? Because champagne is special. When you open a bottle, it makes that exciting pop sound, and then bubbles rush up and fizz everywhere. It feels celebratory and joyful. The bubbles tickle your nose when you drink it. So champagne became associated with celebration and special occasions. Now at midnight on New Year's Eve, people everywhere raise their glasses filled with champagne or sparkling juice or whatever they like to drink, and they toast, clinking glasses together and shouting cheers or Happy New Year. And why do people kiss at midnight? This tradition comes from old European beliefs. People used to think that the first person you saw or spoke to in the new year would set the tone for your entire year ahead. So if you saw an angry person first, you might have an angry year. But if you saw someone you loved, you'd have a year full of love. That's why people started making sure they were next to someone they loved at exactly midnight. And kissing that person became a way to strengthen the bond and ensure love throughout the coming year. Now it's become a romantic tradition where couples kiss at the stroke of midnight. What about New Year's resolutions, those promises we make to ourselves? This tradition is actually 4,000 years old. Remember those Babylonians we talked about at the beginning? During their New Year festival in March, they would make promises to their gods. They would say things like, I promise to return everything I borrowed this year, or I promise to pay all my debts, or I promise to be a better person. They believed that if they kept their promises, the gods would show them favor throughout the year. But if they broke their promises, the gods would be angry with them. Today we make similar resolutions, though we're not usually promising gods anymore. We promise ourselves things like I'll exercise 3 times a week, or I'll eat more vegetables, or I'll finally learn to speak English fluently. But here's a funny fact. Most people break their resolutions within the first few weeks. By February, most of us have forgotten what we promised. But we keep making them every year anyway because it feels good to have hope and goals for the future. And finally, let's talk about the Times Square ball drop, one of the most famous New Year traditions in the world. In New York City, since 1907, a giant glowing ball covered in lights is raised to the top of a tall building in Times Square. At exactly midnight, the ball slowly drops down while everyone counts down together. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And when it reaches the bottom, fireworks explode, confetti falls from the sky like colorful snow, and over 1 million people gathered in the square scream, Happy New Year all at once. Over 1 billion people watch this on television around the world. It's an absolutely incredible sight. So dear friends, now you know the complete truth. January 1st isn't natural or magical or chosen by the universe. It's just a date that humans picked after thousands of years of confusion, arguments, and calendar chaos. Let me tell you what we can learn from this wild story. First, time is what we make it. We think of time as something fixed and solid and unchangeable, but actually humans create time systems. Different cultures measured time in completely different ways. Some used the sun, some used the moon, some used seasons, some used river flooding. Time turned out to be much more flexible than we realized. This teaches us that many things we think are natural or obvious are actually human inventions. We can question traditions and understand where they come from. This makes us wiser and less likely to just accept things without thinking. Second, getting everyone to agree is incredibly hard. Even when Pope Gregory created a better, more accurate calendar based on the best science available, it still took hundreds of years for everyone to accept it. Some countries waited 300 years. Why? Because people resist change. They're comfortable with old ways. They're suspicious of new ideas, especially when they come from people they don't trust. This teaches us to be patient when trying to change things or convince others. Good ideas don't always win immediately. Sometimes they take generations. Third, we can celebrate multiple ways, and that's okay. Today, many people celebrate January 1st using the Gregorian calendar, but they also celebrate Chinese New Year in January or February, or Hindu New Year, which varies by region, or Islamic New Year, which moves through the year, or Jewish New Year called Rosh Hashanah in September or October. This teaches us that there's no single right way to do things. You can honor multiple traditions. Life is richer when we appreciate different cultures and different ways of marking time. Fourth, New Year is really about hope. Whether it's January 1st, March 20th, July something, or any other date, all New Year celebrations share one beautiful thing. Hope. Hope for a fresh start. Hope for better things to come. Hope for new opportunities and new possibilities. Humans everywhere, throughout all of history, in every culture and every time period, have wanted to believe that we can start again, that we can do better, that the future can be brighter than the past. And that's actually quite beautiful when you think about it. And fifth, traditions connect us across time and space. Think about this for a moment. On December 31st, billions of people around the world, speaking hundreds of different languages, practicing different religions, living in completely different cultures, all stop what they're doing and celebrate together. We count down together. We cheer together. We wish each other happiness. For one brief moment, the whole world is united in hope and celebration. That's actually pretty amazing. So as New Year approaches, think about what you want from the coming year. What did you learn this past year? What are you grateful for? What do you want to improve about yourself or your life? What new skill do you want to learn, like maybe becoming fluent in English? How can you be kinder to the people around you? Remember, making resolutions is a 4,000-year-old tradition. You're part of something ancient when you set goals for yourself. But here's my challenge to you. Don't wait for January 1st. If you want to improve your English, start today, right now, this moment. If you want to be kinder, start now. If you want to learn something new, begin immediately. Every single day is a gift. Every morning when you wake up is a new beginning. You don't need fireworks or champagne or a calendar changing to start fresh. You just need to decide. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible time-traveling adventure. I hope you enjoyed learning the strange, funny, and fascinating story of how New Year came to be celebrated on January 1st. Now, when you're at your New Year's Eve party counting down to midnight, you can impress everyone by saying, "Did you know that January 1st being New Year isn't natural?" Let me tell you this crazy story about Julius Caesar, an angry pope, and countries fighting over calendars for 300 years. Everyone will be amazed. As your English teacher and friend, I wish you the most wonderful New Year. Whether you celebrate on January 1st, Chinese New Year, or any other date, I hope the coming year brings you health and happiness, success in your studies, especially English, love from family and friends, new adventures and opportunities, and peace and joy in everything you do. And remember, every day is a new beginning if you choose to make it one. Thank you for listening, and keep learning English with enthusiasm and joy. Happy New Year!